go into the presentation of our next speaker. He's our last keynote, our last storyteller on this stage today. And Yarrow Kraner is the founder of Hatch and H360 AI. He spent 25 years building impact networks that connect people, ideas, and action. His work shows us what true transformation, that it doesn't come from big plans alone. It comes from activating communities and collective intelligence. In his talk, he's going to share, what is it? Powerful stories and insights from his decades of creating global mentorship ecosystems, revealing how these diverse experiences just fuel innovation and how one well-curated network can spark a movement. I think there's a theme here, no? So if you're all ready, I know we're ready, I think he's ready. Let's give our last keynote presenter and storyteller on the stage a very warm volcano welcome. Please welcome Yarrow Kraner!
Hi, everyone. John Ma, Marianne, thank you so much for the invitation to this incredible movement that you're building. Truly grateful. My name is Yarrow, named after an herb, magical healing powers apparently. My parents were hippies. A few years ago, there was this box that landed at my doorstep, and I walked by it. I put it in the house and kind of walked by it time and time again for months. I spent, I think it was like 6 or 7 months, I just not want to open this box. And the address that had been sent to me was from a cousin who I'd never even heard from before, but had my same last name. And one day I opened it up, and inside were fragments of my father's life. Paintings, poems, photographs. When I was 2, my mom walked out on an abusive relationship, so she was going to the grocery store, had 25 cents in her pocket, and we never looked back. Several years later, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. I met him once when I was 21 years old. But as I was holding these fragments in my hands, I realized something, that we all carry with us these pieces of those who came before us, the things we inherit. And we don't just inherit fragments and pieces, we also inherit fractured systems and inequalities and global challenges. In addition to that, we also inherit these unique gifts. I call them superpowers. And those superpowers can help us bridge those gaps. The question is, what will we do with what we inherit? And what will we do with the time that we have? What will we build? So I want you to think about something like, how many of you have met someone incredible in the last day and a half? Someone you think that might even know for the rest of your life? Yeah. So I believe that the solutions to all the world's challenges lie in this room, in each of you. When I was 9, my mom was working 4 jobs. This is, jump cut a few years later, to earn her family's first college degree. And we sat and watched our home get condemned and bulldozed. It was the 3rd time in 2 years that happened. But she stood steady by me, and I think that was a moment where I realized the word resilience. Like the things that are uninvited change can either break you or build you. Years later, I found myself moving from Montana to Los Angeles, convinced I was moving to the epicenter of creative genius. And I found myself on a balcony, surrounded by success, but struggling for meaning. And I just asked this question one night. I was standing at this huge Hollywood Hills party, looking around the room. Everyone looked exactly the same, dressed in black, good looking. I was like, what am I even doing here? I'm some kid from Montana. And I asked that question, like, where are they? And instantly, they started coming out of the mist. One by one, like the universe just started providing them. They started revealing themselves. A composer teaching deaf kids how to read and play music. A scientist working on this team to piece the ozone layer back together. 1999, like big news. A teacher volunteering weekends at the local soup kitchen for the homeless. Extraordinary people hiding in plain sight. Real life superheroes. And when I shifted that lens and realized that they were everywhere, that changed everything. They're inside of each of us. So I began building ways to connect these superheroes together so they had a network of people that they could lean in on and know that they're not alone. So that summer in 1999, we started what was called the Hero Project. And I asked one simple question of all the people that I met, what makes you super? because we all have something. And at first it's like a little tongue-in-cheek. It's like people kind of push back on it, like, no. Let me really dive in. Let me find out like what it is that makes you unique and super. What are you going to take to the world? And when we ask that question to kids, they just like lit up. They're just like, oh, well, like I got a long list of things, right? Because that moment you define your best self, all the molecules in your body start to conspire to become that best self. You literally start to manifest that aspirational superhero inside of you. So we ended up designing trading cards around these people and their real stories. You know, we did a whole stay-in-school program with Shaq. I remember this one kid named Max. Once he was supernated as Captain Kablam. He was autistic in a wheelchair and told his mom, we got this letter from her, it's like, hey, Max thinks he can fly now. Like, think about that. A kid that's in a wheelchair, aspirationally just knowing that he can soar. And that was like in the first of sort of a few different moments where I was like, huh, this is interesting. So we started building these trading cards around people. They could play these games to gather these points, get into the trading card deck. But as we started growing, we ended up growing to about 1.5 million people around the world from 1999 to 2003. We started asking this question like, hey, how do you save the world? Type in your zip code. Type in your zip code and you're given 20 things you can do within a 3-mile radius of where you live to impact your community, your backyard. So we started mobilizing people into their communities where they were volunteering for the elderly and walking dogs for the Humane Society and doing neighborhood cleanups and park reclamations. And in 1 year of that program, we had 500,000 volunteer hours. And so people would go volunteer just to kind of be a part of this game, but then they'd show up and they'd be like, wow, what an amazing young person you are. And they're like, oh, really? Yeah, it's like I'm living into my superhero. And that just started this sort of groundswell. So we got an acquisition offer in 2003. But the first thing that happened was starting to get all these letters. They started stacking up in our office from child psychologists and parents and teachers. And that was where people were thanking us, like the very act of asking people to sort of live into their superness. And it was from child psychologists, and that's where I was like, wow, I found my purpose. I feel so lucky. When the acquisition offer came in, I said no longer had 51% of the company. Everyone else was like, of course we're going to say yes. And so I ended up going back to Montana and trying to figure out what was next. And I realized in that moment, as we were getting those letters, that creativity is a universal superpower. We think often of creativity as the arts, music and painting. It's like a nice to have, but absolutely everything that we wear, drive, live in, everything around us that we use every single day was a creative idea. And as we start dissecting, arts programs from school systems, we're going to lose that creative muscle, and we're going to start losing the ability to start creating inventions. Kids in preschool, they ask over 100 questions a day. Unfortunately, by the time they hit middle school, some of that has suppressed. Their curiosity has been stripped away. Don't ask so many questions. That curiosity is a superpower. So if community and collective intelligence is the fuel, curiosity is the spark. We must keep asking, what if? We've got to keep living into that what if. So my life's work, connecting fragments and people, the one thing I've learned is that collective intelligence is not about gathering more data. It's about gathering us. So I got back to Montana. I realized that they bought a brand and not the purpose, and the purpose can't be purchased. So it was sort of a reset moment. I started again. And, that's when I realized, I wanted to continue to do the same work. And that's when I founded Hatch, a global network designed to cross-pollinate diverse thinkers. So the key for Hatch, in addition to the peer-to-peer mentorship, anybody here know what mycelium is? Mycelial networks? The largest organism under forest floors. It's like a fungi that connects all these forest floors and exchanges nutrients and wisdom for thousands and thousands of miles. Regions of North America and South America are connected underground by these mycelium, and one tree gets sick, all the rest of the trees send it nutrients and wisdom. That's what a community is. That's what Volcano Summit is. That's what John Ma and Marianne are building here, the mycelial network and this peer-to-peer network. And the other piece for us is cross-pollinating diversity. And the key for us specifically is, if you have a bunch of area experts staring down a problem, you get a very predictable output of a solution for that challenge. Melding of the minds from the astronaut to the architect, from the teacher to the farmer, from the 17-year-old kid that's turning human waste into electricity and has 2 patents, to someone that's like got a lab downstairs and is inventing something new. Maybe it's like a new piece of AI called Siri. All these different people come together, and that's how we grow. In our differences, we grow. And in our differences, we can also look at new ways of solving these big challenges. And of course, there's no shortage of those. They just keep coming. So over 21 years, we've tracked 10,000 collaborations. Artists have inspired scientists, CEOs have reimagined companies. But a couple years ago, this was a key piece. There was a research paper that came out around why there's not more progress on the 17 global goals. And that research showed that there's a lack of focus on the relational aspects of systems change. And change moves at the speed of relationships. And that's why we spend a lot of time around cultivating a chemistry set and a container by which those relationships can be accelerated, much like here. So in the 2 different lanes of Hatch, the summits where we convene and the studios where we deploy Hatchers and alumni, that's where we start to point all these, almost like an inverse spectrum of rainbow of insights and perspectives, pointing a white light at these big challenges, acupuncture points for systems change. I'll give you one quick example. A couple years ago, well, about 10 years ago, there was a lot of increased awareness around the toxicity of microplastics. 10 million tons a year are dropped into the ocean. That plastic all finds itself, starts grinding up, and evaporating, precipitating, and end up in the mountain streams of South America, North America, Europe, and so on, and in our bodies and creating all sorts of cancers and diseases. And so we, in 2019, put 160 executives onto a boat, 2/3 of which represented the largest creators of plastics in the world. Dow Chemical, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, Nestle. The other third were a bunch of NGOs trying to shut them down. So in the months leading up to that, it was very tense. And we were doing a lot of conversations with a lot of different people about, how this was going to go down and trying to promise a safe space and so on. Even the week before we showed up on the boat, Greenpeace had sent all their volunteers out onto these beaches and gathered all this trash, and specifically trash from Nestle, and built this huge, 2-story tall Tyrannosaurus Rex monster, dropped it off on the headquarters of Nestle. So they had this huge trash monster made out of Nestle trash found on the beach. They happened to show up at the boat at the exact same time to check in at the front desk. Turn around and look at me, I'm like, and they're like, you bunked us together? You put us in the same room? I'm like, yeah. And tomorrow there's a panel called Sleeping with the Enemy. And so trying to poke the bear a little bit to get people to sort of the whole design challenge for the boat was how quickly, or is it even possible, to melt off that outer armor and get people to forget the agenda, forget their name badge and affiliation, and zoom out and look at this as a collective human challenge that's impacting everyone regardless of geography, demographic, class, anything. Everyone, right? It's impacting everyone. And so we got people in the water right out of the gates. We led with science and data. I got people in rubber suits, great equalizer. Everyone looks kind of ridiculous. And in the water, sliced open fish, showed plastics in the fish. We had a lab on board. We tested the water. We showed the results of that. And then a cello starts playing, and a spoken word poet starts talking, taking us to 45 years in the future. And of course, there's some cynics in the room. They're going what the hell's going on? But after one by one, the guy's a really amazing storyteller. People start kind of dropping in. He's like, hey, congratulations. 45 years ago, you all gathered onto a boat. And that problem's long been solved. Now pick up that pen in front of you and start describing that lever of power that you had proximity to. What did it move? Now write yourself a detailed thank you letter, being very grateful to your past self about which part of the solution you played. How did you move that lever? And we gave that like a little 15-minute head start, and we're like, oh, there's one more thing. When you're done with these letters, we're going to collect them and send them to your families so your kids can read them, and your parents, and your siblings. Dead silence. They're like, now people are scratching stuff out and rewriting them with a little bit more intention. You can see a couple of their hands are even like shaking and some like tears welling up in their eyes, and like, all right, something shifted, right? You start hitting people at a soul level. So the brain works in so many different ways. You have like science and data with the cello music, with the spoken word poetry, and all of a sudden you're like, all right, we're unlocking human potential. And so ever since, I mean, that one and a few other projects that we've been doing, companies, organizations, there's a dozen universities that hired Hatch to reimagine the future of education. And I kind of view it almost like in 21 years, there's 3,500 plus alumni that are all the best of the world at what they do. I view it as like an infinite library. I can walk in there and just pick off those books, like Dekai, right? Like, you want to know about AI? Talk to Dekai. It's like there's an infinite library of incredible resources. So today, perhaps the greatest fracture is not technological or environmental, it's relational. We live in a fragmented world, divided politics, broken systems, generational wounds, and yet each fragment holds a part of the story, a part of the solution. So humanity is not about one person at the top of power. It's about designing systems where the wisdom of the many becomes visual and heard. In the US, polarization currently is tearing at the fabric of our communities. Families are divided, friends are lost, our friendships are lost, neighbors alienated, trust collapsing. In the 80s, about half of Americans said neighbors can be trusted, and by 2020, that number got cut in half. Trust is the glue of community, and it's dissolving. Proximity, the antidote of fragmentation, is disappearing. But here's the hope. Division is not the destiny. Polarization is not permanent. That's why in-person gatherings like Hatch and the Volcano Summit matter. As Jama said this morning, these intentional events rebuild trust, accelerate new relationships, spark collaboration, catalyze mentorship, and converge a shared purpose. If fragmentation is the disease, community, collective intelligence, is the antidote. One of the challenges that Hatch is facing next is depolarization. So in November, 1 year from the last election, we're convening 100 people in Mexico, movement architects, storytellers, political and behavioral scientists, culture shapers, artists, funders, technologists, entrepreneurs, and wildcard thinkers working on solutions to depolarize the country. Because it's not even just matters to America. Clearly, we're all feeling, everyone in the world is feeling the results of some bad decisions right now. So when we start mapping out these ecosystems, part of it is like finding all the people that are already working in these spaces, civic and trust building, narrative and civic, cultural infrastructure, faith values, civic renewal, youth-led civic organizations. But I almost kind of view it as like these campfires that are happening around this dark mountain. They're siloed. They're all happening in different parts. It's like as if someone cut the necklace and the pearls scattered across the floor, and you got to go find them all and thread them back together and pull them back into proximity. That's part of the role that Hatch has, but we're also then finding people that are not experts in that space, who haven't been doing it for 30 years, who are asking them to think about things from a different perspective. Has anyone here heard about the framework, the 6 conditions of systems change? So the theory, written by this guy named John Kania, there's these 6 conditions that hold systems in place. All 6 need to be impacted for a system to actually shift. Interestingly enough, it starts from the bottom up. You can see the 1, 2, 3. The bottom up, it starts with story and narrative. And so there's a lot of there's a lot of case studies. Civil rights movement, women's rights to votes, gay rights marriage. Gay rights marriage in the US hit a huge inflection point once that narrative locked in as love is love. It started flipping state by state by state, which then tiered up to federal policy. So being able to coalesce around a very specific story and a narrative starts to shift the mental models, which then moves up into the power dynamics and the resource flows. So we start with the story and we start moving up. So if community and collective intelligence is the fuel and curiosity is the spark, we must keep asking, why not and what if? Like, what if deaf kids could play music? What if the ozone layer can be healed? What if every child saw themselves as a superhero? And what if the skills to solve these problems were in this room? Because they are. So back to that box, this fragments of my father's life, and I got a little teary when I heard your story. The reminder that we inherit pieces of family, of culture, of broken systems, and the choice is, will we leave them scattered or will we thread them together and pull the proximity tight? How will you weave your gifts into this collective story? How will you save the world? Start with where you are. Literally, like look around the room right now. Find one person that you've not talked to, make eye contact, make it a point to go talk to them after this talk. I'll give it just a couple seconds. Look around, find someone interested in looking. That's everyone, by the way. And ask what they're working on, what they might need. Seek collaboration. And together, we can hatch a better world. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Jama, Marianne.